Hey guys, Bicebump here, bringing you this advanced Unholy rotation guide for raiding, specifically for the Sun Lane hero talents. A lot of people playing 11.1, Sun Lane is a new thing. We played Rider previously, and the rotation is quite different from what we usually did in past expansions as well. I will try and cover all the kind of min-max aspects of playing Sun Lane in the raid, talking quite extensively about the whys and the hows and everything. So you get a good understanding about both how we play, but also why we play the way we do. This will include talk about the opener, post-opener, dark transformation windows, outside dark transformation windows, cooldowns, and cleave. Everything is focused on a raiding perspective. So if you're looking for like Mythic Plus tips and tricks, I got videos that you can just have a look at my channel that discuss that in more detail. Anyway, I will assume that you guys know how to play Unholy at a basic level, so I won't cover the stuff like, resources and procs and whatnot. You played Unholy, you understand how to do it, but you want to understand how to get from your 70, 80 passes to 95, 99. That's what this is for. Starting out, we have the opener. I got it up there. It looks a bit odd, and I think there are a couple of things to cover here about why we do things. So we start out with a Festoon Strike into Death Knight. The Festoon Strike is to set up wounds to use on Apocalypse at late stage. Death Knight, it deals a little bit of damage, but more importantly, it gives you a little bit of haste. And this is kind of like, I'll talk about a little bit about it later, but it makes sense in the opener, because we get that haste, helps us increase our opener damage, and it can just boost everything we do. Anyway, we follow up with Apocalypse, and then into our Dark Transformation. And after Dark Transformation, we're going to hit a couple GCDs before we use our Unholy Assault. It's 3 Vampiric Strikes, and we weave in any Death Calls if you get a Silent Doom proc. Now, I see a lot of people asking, why 3 Vampiric Strikes? Why not 2? Why not 1? Why not 4? So, the main reason, first of all, why is there a delay between Dark Transformation and Unholy Assault? The primary reason is because our damage ramps in our Dark Transformation window. In the opener, it's more rampy than elsewhere, and it's due to a couple of reasons. First of all, we have our buff, Gift of the Sun Lane, stacks up to 7 times, and the higher that stacks, the more haste we get, and the more death call damage we deal. So obviously, when we start at 1 stack, we won't do as much damage as once we stacked up to 7. Furthermore, we have a Sun Lane talent that stacks up to 4 times with Vampiric Strike. Again, damage increases with the number of Vampiric Strikes, and this is primarily also at the start of the encounter. Finally, the third kind of ramping, small ramping aspect as well, like we have our Festamite as well. Those stacks ramp over time. But finally, the infliction of sorrow damage ramps over time. So how it works is that your Dark Transformation will apply some dots. Every time you hit Vampiric Strike, those dots are going to be extended. And every time you hit Vampiric Strike, you deal a percentage of the remaining damage of the dots. So when you start out your DT window, your dots might be at 16 seconds. But at the end, they're going to be at 40 seconds. And a percentage of damage is a lot more towards the end. So that's why that damage also ramps. So you probably get the kind of idea here. There are so many different aspects of the Unholy DK in the opener that ramps over time. And we want to put Unholy Assault a bit later, so they overlap the 20% damage buff towards this big ramping end of this ramping window. If you use it too early, it's going to essentially run out before we're actually doing our peak DPS, which is something we want to avoid. Turns out when you do sims that 3 Vampiric Strikes is roughly the kind of place you want to be at, so that's just what we do. Also mention, I think I forgot that specifically, but Race Abomination here, it comes a bit later. This is actually quite new. I was playing around with the opener the other day, and in Sims, I noticed that delaying a Race Abomination is actually a good idea. So you use that right after Apocalypse. This is, again, to get better overlap. If you use Race Abomination at the start, you have these like Festoon Strike, Death Knight, and lots of other stuff happening before, you hit Unholy Assault. So there's not that good overlap between Unholy Assault and Race Abomination, as well as our other buffs. So that's why we want to use that a bit later. Alright, so that's the opener. You kind of just learn it and then execute it. But we also need to discuss what happens after you press Unholy Assault. how does the priority look like at the start of the encounter, and how does it change like at the later stages. So once you press Unholy Assault, you're likely sitting at 3 Gifted Sun Lane stacks and quite a lot of runic power. At this stage, you really want to get up to 7 Gifted Sun Lane stacks, but you never want to overcap runic power or waste Sudden Dooms. So essentially, you're gonna try and hit Vampiric Strike unless you're about to hit cap runic power or you get a Sudden Doom proc. This kind of means that you're doing like, you know, 1 Vampiric Strike, 1 Death Call, 1 Vampiric Strike, 1 Death Call, kind of alternating. But you want to kind of prioritize getting up to 7. And once you go up to 7, you want to swap back to prioritizing Death Call. Now, the kind of simple explanation here is that, you know, Death Call does an absolute ton amount of damage. You want to prioritize that so you hit as many as possible. In reality, what you really want to optimize is hitting 0 runic power at the end of your Dark Transformation window, right? So it's not like you need to hard priority Death Call when you got, you know, 10, 5, 7 seconds left of Dark Transformation. But at the end, you really want to make sure that once Dark Transformation finishes, you hit Death Call as much as possible. So that's kind of like the way you want to do it. You can do that by just hard prioritizing Death Call. However, it ends up being a bit suboptimal in most cases because if you hit Vamp Strikes a bit early in the window, that's going to buff your dots, which buffs your Vamp Strikes later, and so on. So it's a tiny thing, but just make sure that towards the end of Dark Transformation, your runic power should be at 0. All right. You can have a look at the potion and the trinkets, whatever. You ideally want to use a trinket with Unholy Assault, as again to overlap the maximum, like the biggest part of your burst. Also, it's a good idea to get your PI with Unholy Assault. Potion you can use for Dark Transformation a bit earlier because that lasts for much longer. But that's kind of it. Now, moving on to, so we did an opener, we did the post opener. Let's talk about Dark Transformation window and what you do outside Dark Transformation window. So I didn't actually cover it, but in Dark Transformation, you really don't want to hit anything else but Vampiric Strike and Death Call. They are such high priority because they get insane value during Dark Transformation. Vampiric Strike, it summons your Blood Beast, it increases your dot duration, which increases damage, and it also does a load of damage. Death Call does an insane amount of damage when in Dark Transformation, so that's also high priority. So this means that you kind of ignore everything else. You don't hit Festive Strike, you don't need to apply dots again, because obviously they don't fall off because you're extending them. But like things like Affirmation Limb, don't press that at this stage. Also, you don't need to use Death Decay. Like, you know, all other buttons, it's only going to be Vampiric Strike and Death Call, and that's it. Now, you executed your window, Dark Transformation finishes. What happens at this stage is that your next Skirt Strike consumes your dots. So you press that, dots fall off, you hit Outbreak to reapply them. And then you move into our kind of like standard single target rotation, which ends up being quite a small proportion of the entire fight. Here you are going to hit Festive Strike. This is like the only instance you hit Festive Strike to build your wounds. And then you're going to burst them back down with Skirt Strike. The general vibe is just, you know, hit Festive Strike so that you are between 2 and 3 wounds at all times. This means that you leave yourself a little bit of room if you get Sudden Doom procs, which will consume wounds. Then you have them for it. And then also means that when you get your Apocalypse coming up after a while, you can hit that and it's not going to be a problem. But this part of the fight is really simple. Like, you hit Outbreak once, it's usually the only thing you need. And it's just going to be some Festive Strike, some Skirt Strikes, and some Death Calls. The main thing is that if you hit Death Call and you proc a Vampiric Strike, you can proc that off Death Call outside of DT. You want to hit that immediately. But otherwise, it is really quite simple. And then you continue doing that until your next Dark Transformation window where you can hit Apocalypse and then DT. And then you go back to your Vamp Strike and Death Call spam. That's the general vibe, right? That's how Unholy currently works in the raid. When it comes to Death Decay usage, I talked about, you know, you do use it in an opener. It is technically a DPS upgrade to use it in these kind of periods where you're not in your Dark Transformation window. It gives a little bit of haste, and it also increases the probability of getting Vampiric Strike procs. Usually, unless you're incredibly lucky, it's going to be fine. what you're aiming for here is that your gift of Sun Lane buff is going to last you until the next Dark Transformation window, and it will do that unless you get incredibly unlucky. But still, there are some instances where you want to kind of fish for it. So popping down Death Decay when you know that the boss will be stationary is then going to help you guarantee that extension, and it's going to give you some haste and increase your damage overall. So that's something to consider, that once you exit your Dark Transformation window, you consume your dots, you pop down Death Decay, and then that's going to kind of bridge the gap until the next Dark Transformation. I would only do this if it's a fight where we kind of don't move around a lot, so you don't lose out on that uptime on the haste buff, or the actual buff that gives you higher Vampiric Strike proc chance. Great, so that's like the core aspect of it. When we talk about cooldowns, as we talk about opener, that's the exact order. We kind of just follow that order in subsequent sets. Obviously, every 45 seconds it's only going to be Apocalypse and Dark Transformation. Just do Apocalypse in Dark Transformation, and then every 1.5 minutes you're going to add Unholy Assault. There's no real reason to delay Unholy Assault at this stage, because you ramped up all your buffs anyway, so there's no like reason to delay it. But it's going to be delayed naturally, so unless you kind of mess up and don't use a cooldown, you're going to have to delay it a little bit, but that's absolutely fine. Just press it as soon as it comes up. If that's the GCD after Dark Transformation, I would say that is completely fine and not a problem. The one cooldown we need to talk about, which is a bit outside of this 1.5 minute scope, is the Abomination Limb. So you use that either for add waves, when you can do AoE damage. That's where it excels. You can grip up stuff and it deals relatively good AoE damage. Otherwise, I just use it after my Dark Transformation finishes. So you don't interfere with the Dark Transformation window. You just use it straight afterwards, or you can use it just before your cooldowns. So if like you're about to use Apocalypse, Dark Transformation, and everything, you can hit Abomination Limb just before that, and that's also going to be absolutely fine. Now, finally, when it comes to Cleave, this happens quite a lot on many different fights. What we do differently here is that we're going to use Death Decay. That's the primary way of doing Cleave. Ideally, you pop it down before the ad spawn, so you don't need to waste a GCD when they're up. So you know they're spawning, pop it down, and then usually get sufficient Cleave throughout the duration to be all okay. Also, if they live for, a couple of seconds, I don't know what exact kind of criteria is, but it's worthwhile to dot them up if they live for like 10 seconds. But that's kind of it. You don't commit Outbreak unless it's worthwhile to have the dot ticking a couple times. All right. So that's actually it. I think that covers all the, I think hopefully most questions I see people ask and are confused about. Hopefully you're satisfied with my explanations for the opener and why we do things. If I forgot anything, one final thing, Soul Reaper. Mate, we kind of never press this button. It is really niche. When you pick it up, it is outside Dark Transformation windows only and in execute. So if you are running Soul Reaper, which you probably are, after DT finishes, you can use 2 or 3, and then you go into the next Dark Transformation window, and then you can't use it for a while, and then outside of it, you can start pressing again. That's the only instance, and the boss obviously should be below 35% health. That's it. All right. I don't feel like we need to discuss anything with like procs. Sun and Doom are high priority, just use them instantly. No issue there. And that's kind of it. Same thing with Vampiric Strike, just use them immediately. Yeah. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if I forgot anything, or if you are still confused about some aspects. Upvote, downvote, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.